And welcome in everyone to another episode of Historic Hot Laps. This episode we want to take the time to recognize a true legend of the sport, somebody we just lost recently, Mr. Parnelli Jones. So we'll kick it off with that and start going through the history of Parnelli and start this episode with our history portion.
Parnelli Jones is giving everyone a driving lesson. He's a full lap ahead of the field. Parnelli Jones keeps a safe distance behind Don White as he takes the checkered flag.
Parnelli Jones, born August 12th, 1933. Birth name Rufus Parnell Jones, formerly Parnelli. Found his love for racing as a youngster from California in the jalopy class in the early days, late 40s, teenage years. Moving himself into stock cars, sprint cars. Through the 1950s, he achieved a total of 15 stock car wins in the NASCAR Pacific Coast Late Model Series, what would be the equivalent today of, say, ARCA West. He also moved into sprint cars in the late 50s, leading to a championship for the Midwest Sprint organization in 1960. Talent was seen on the dirt tracks, which led to a sponsorship to get him into the Indy 500 in 1961. That 1961 performance was pretty amazing. Through that, he won Rookie of the Year. He was hit by a rock. Mind you, this was prior to any kind of real safety equipment. Very, very minimal safety measures taking place during that time. But he was struck by a rock during this race while I don't believe he was leading, but he was up front, near the front of the pack. Cut him open with the rock after he got hit. Started bleeding all over the place. Finished the race, covered in blood, but he did fall back into 12th place due to that, which rookie year, that's incredibly respectable, especially in those days. Just finishing alone was an achievement. His time at the Indy 500 led him into more USAC races. He became one of the best of all time over the USAC years of the 60s. 1964 USAC season, he had 18 wins. All were in the National Series, 2 Champ Car Series, 8 Stock Car Series, 1 Sprint Car Series, and 7 Midget National wins. 18 wins on a season in multiple racing leagues, all sanctioned by USAC. He was the USAC Sprint Champion in 1960, 1961, 1962, and then got himself up front and tasted the milk with the win, the Indy 500 in 1963. Basically, the 63-64 seasons, if it wasn't Parnelli Jones winning, it was AJ Foyt winning. Between the two, they took the majority of the races in almost every category in USAC. I'll do a quick rundown here of all his championship titles. He's got quite a list to his name here. Looking at championship title, Sprint Car USAC Midwest Series 1960, overall national Sprint Car champion for USAC in 1961 and 1962, and USAC Stock Car champion in 1964. He was known to split his time between a whole lot of leagues, so he did only achieve 1 Indianapolis 500 win in 1963, like we mentioned before. He did run quite a few of them, but it was a pretty legendary win for him. He did also run the Baja 1000 in 1971 and 1972, winning those events. So on the road, on pavement, asphalt, dirt, Baja dirt scene, the guy did it all. His Champ Car career consisted of 59 races over a total of 8 years. Best finish outside of Indy was third place podium in 1962. He raced the Champ Cars starting in Milwaukee in 1960, and his last Champ Car race was 1967, the Indianapolis 500. His Champ Car career, 59 races, run over the course of 8 years, 6 wins, 17 podiums, 12 pole positions. Just over the course of 8 years, that's a pretty incredible record, especially in those days when it wasn't apples to apples. A lot of stuff wasn't the same. There was a rule book, but it wasn't today where you've got computerized car scaling, making sure everybody's within, thousands upon thousands of tolerance. Everything's the exact same. This was run what you brung as long as it fits the rule book. It has the very basic safety features. To have 6 wins, 17 podiums, 12 poles, that's incredible. His first race in Champ Car was 1960 Milwaukee. His last race was 1967 at the Indy 500. His first win was 1961 at the Bobby Ball Memorial race in Phoenix. His last win was in 1965 in Milwaukee at the Rex Mays Classic. Also during his Champ Car time, he was also running the NASCAR series, as well as splitting time with the USAC stock car program. His Cup Series career, 34 races, ran over 12 years. Mind you, a lot of that overlapped with Champ Car races, midget races, local sprints. We're just basically focusing on the national titles, but he ran it all for years. It's 34 races run over 12 years. His first race, 1956. Last race, 1970 in Riverside. Totaling 4 wins, 11 top 10s, and 3 pole positions in his overall NASCAR Cup career. Couple of fun facts. 1967, he drove the Indianapolis 500 for Andy Granatelli, which that name, any of you history buffs might relate to the Paxton Turbo car, the STP Paxton Turbo. He dominated that race, dropped out with 3 laps to go after having some transmission issues with a small simple bearing. That car dominated everything to the point that in 1968, the turbine-powered cars were outlawed by the rulebook, just to keep a competitive nature for everybody else. That's how much they were outshining everyone. And I want to quote a little article here about the turbo cars. It says, in 1968, Jones headed a super roster of 7 drivers signed by Andy Granatelli to drive the STP Lotus 56 turbine cars in an unprecedented single-team assault on the Indianapolis 500. The deaths of Jim Clark and Mike Spence, both those drivers we'll cover in later episodes, the deaths of Jim Clark and Mike Spence, plus a serious injury to Jackie Stewart, whittled the entry to 4. Jones, testing his reworked 1967 car in practice, was dissatisfied with the car's performance compared to the newer wedge-shaped Lotus 56 turbines and had concluded the car was unsafe. He stepped out of the car, which was subsequently assigned to Joe Leonard, who promptly wrecked the car in practice. Jones retired from driving Indy cars, but later admitted, if I hadn't already won Indy, they could have never kept me out of that car. So, quite the experience with the STP turbine-powered cars. A lot of history with that we can cover on later episodes, but let's cover his Parnelli's team ownership. He started Vels Parnelli Jones Racing, which won Indianapolis 500 again as an owner in 1970 and 1971, with Al Unser driving the Johnny Lightning Special. The team also won the 1970, 1971, and 1972 USAC National Championships. So this is all under the guidance of Parnelli as a team owner. He also owned the Parnelli Formula One race team from late 1974 to early 1976. Formula One team not as successful as other ventures that he had, but he did make an attempt with it. He went back to his love of off-road racing in 1976 as the owner of the Walker Evans Score Truck, and Evans won the championship that year with Parnelli Jones as the owner. They teamed up again in 1977 and won the Core Class 2 championship in Baja. Jones also owned several different Class 1 vehicles at the Baja 500 and Baja 1000. He won 2 championships as a dirt car owner and did the USAC Triple Crown 3 different times. So overall, pretty successful career as a driver, as an owner. Other business ventures that Parnelli had that don't get talked about enough: Parnelli Jones Inc., which was basically a Firestone enterprise for Firestone racing tires. Had shops in 14 states, sold tires, shocks, passenger car tires, other automotive products, your equivalent to, your basic tire shop these days, with a little more racing out of the back. He also was involved in the manufacturing of race wheels, US Mags, American Racing. He had his hands in all that stuff. So the guy knew how to run a business. He knew how to drive a race car. So it's super respectable. A few other awards and honors. He was inducted into the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame in 1978, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Hall of Fame in 1985, International Motorsports Hall of Fame in 1990, National Midget Auto Racing Hall of Fame, again, 1990, National Sprint Car Hall of Fame in 1991, Motorsports Hall of Fame of America in 92, West Coast Stock Car Hall of Fame in 2002, and the USAC Hall of Fame in 2012. So fortunately, he got to live through all those years and be inducted into all those great Hall of Fame organizations, respected by all, to really highlight his achievements. And we wish his family the best. Well-respected individual by all. There's no bad press on the guy. Just an all-American motorsports hero. So for that, Parnelli, if you're up there listening, we appreciate everything you've done for us and wish your family the best.
Said, and here's a look out on the course now at Parnelli Jones, and he sure is moving. In car number 83, another Bronco. Must remind him of his old dirt track racing days. But this is a lot more rugged than those closed courses.
And I guess, following a little history lesson, I guess it's time we do a little race recap from the last week. It seems like every week's a busy week right now, but I guess we are in the prime of the race season, so there is that. Kicking it off, let's see what we got here. ARCA at Mid-Ohio. There's a little bit of drama in that race. William Sawalich gets the win, but not without some drama. Connor Mosak was a leader. Should have been credited the race win. Personally, he should have had the race win, but didn't serve a drive-through penalty for jumping the restart, which, if you look at it, you can't really see a jump in the restart. So that's kind of tough, because if you can't, I mean, obviously these cars, they're outfitted with timing devices and everything else. You know, they've got a better way of looking at things than we do. But if you can't see it on camera while watching the race replays and everything else, how do you call it as a full-on jump? I mean, that's just an opinion. But that caused him to lose out on the race, drop positions because he didn't serve a penalty, which serving the penalty would have also ruined the race for him. So it's just one of those things, racing events. But either way, congrats. It was a pretty good race overall, pretty exciting. One really exciting fun fact for that race is Indiana's own Connor Daly had a ride in that one, fellow podcaster. He had the polka dot machine out there, looking good, great looking car. Got himself a top 10. I believe he finished 8th after all the penalty shuffle and everything at the end of the race there. So 8th in his very first ARCA race, I believe. Definitely his most, hasn't done one in a while if he has done one in the past, but I think that was the first time he's ran ARCA. He's ran Cup, Xfinity, and Trucks, and now ARCA. So he's ran them all, but 8th place finish to him. So congrats on that. We had Xfinity at New Hampshire. Stage 1, Sam Mayer. Stage 2, Christopher Bell, and the win goes to Christopher Bell. Christopher Bell at New Hampshire is just ridiculous. I've heard some stat that 7 of his last 11 were at New Hampshire or some crazy thing, but he's pretty good at really any of those mile and a half tracks. But New Hampshire's, man, he's got the number there, that's for sure. So let's move on. We had some weather in New Hampshire, so Cup qualifying and all that was screwed up. Cup ends up going out based on rulebook qualifying, and you're going to be surprised to hear this. Again, Stage 1, Christopher Bell. Stage 2, Denny Hamlin. And then Stage 3, we get a red flag for weather. At this point, it's looking like chances of going back out, hard to say. Was it safe to go back out? There's all kinds of debates with it, but end of the day, throw on those new wet weather tires. It's obviously not a super speedway, so it's a pretty flat track, so they can run the wet tires. And basically what that is there's not enough water to spray, but it gives you a competitive advantage to be on the wet tires and keep running within your means. And there's going to be obviously dry lines come out, different things happen, but thankfully, due to the introduction of these tires this year, that race was able to continue and go the distance. Prior to that, without those wet weather tires, there was nothing you could do about it. The race would have been called. That track is not lit up, so it was getting pretty dark towards the end anyway. They wouldn't have time to fully dry it for full slicks to come back out to get going again. So thankfully, the folks at Goodyear and the wet weather tire they've got designed worked out pretty well for everyone. And then Christopher Bell gets the win. So doubleheader weekend for Christopher Bell on wins. Pretty awesome to see. Doing his thing. Obviously, he's very secure in the playoffs. I'm sure, just like previous years, he will be in the top 4 when it comes time to go back to Phoenix for the season finale. But anything could change, right? It's motorsports. Going to the old opposite coast, we had Indy at Laguna Seca, Monterey. And I just want to start by saying this was the last race in the non-hybrid, fully combustion engine era of IndyCar. So it's kind of sad, honestly. That era is now concluded because Mid-Ohio is going to be with hybrid power. And I think we've seen the end of an era. I don't know that we'll see, aside from, some vintage stuff and things like that. We're not going to see a full-on sanctioned competition race with non-hybrid powered Indy cars again. So take a moment to think about that. It's really kind of sad. The stuff we all kind of grew up on and love seeing. And not saying that it won't be good racing again. There's a lot of good hype about it. Obviously, other leagues have been doing it for a while. It's working out really well for sports cars and things like that. But just the end of an era, kind of sad. So going into Indy, Alex Palou on the pole. Honda's dominated. The Fast Six in qualifying, 5 of the 6 cars were Hondas. Hondas have that track figured out for sure. The only one that broke through the Honda barrier was the Historic Hall Laps podcast favorite, Alexander Rossi, native to the West Coast, driving the Chevrolet Power for McLaren. And he is able to break into the Fast Six, get himself a decent starting spot. So pretty impressive. The only Chevrolet that could make it, I think, in the top, I don't remember how many rows, but it was pretty decent. As far as the race goes, pretty decent race. Everybody was predicting it'd be about half the cautions we had the year before, and I think it was even less than that. Pretty decent race. Had a couple good battles on track, but that track, once you get spread out, it's so hard to get gathered up again, and except for on restarts. And if you do time your restarts right, run away with it. I believe during qualifying they were saying that some crazy number, but the majority of the winners at Laguna Seca in this generation have been from the front row after qualifying. So once you get out there, as long as you're on the right strategy, it's yours for the taking. So that being said, Palou starts on the pole. Palou gets the win. Herta comes in second, and Rossi finally gets himself a podium this year. Herta also excited in second. I mean, Palou's Palou. He's going to get some wins. We know that. Good to see Herta get a finish. Obviously, he wants a win, and that track means a lot to him. We had him as our number 1 pick. He finished second, so that's not a bad option. But he's getting closer and closer to where he wants to be. Rossi gets third, which is great momentum going in to Mid-Ohio and also being a contract year for him. And he had a lot of good things to say about the hybrid as well during his testing portions of stuff. So I do believe that with the hybrid and the momentum that Rossi's got, as long as there's something that doesn't fail him mechanically or a team issue or something, he's got what he needs to keep going and improve this season. One thing to touch on too, while we're at Laguna Seca, you had a doubleheader with NXT. Louis Foster for Andretti Autosport gets the win Saturday and Sunday, doubles down. So congrats to them. Couple dirt track action. Actually, dirt and asphalt, I guess. USAC Silver Crown cars at Madison International Speedway, and they're in Wisconsin. Dakota Armstrong gets his first career win in Silver Crown Series, so congrats to Dakota on that very first win. That was exciting. It was a pretty good finish. Pretty standard race overall. It's a clean track, a lot of clean lines, clean racing. But congrats to Dakota on the Silver Crown win. World of Outlaws, the old High Bank Hustle in Brandon, South Dakota. Tyler Courtney wins the feature. Hoddenchild dominated the majority of that race and cut down a tire with a few laps to go, puts him out. Tyler Courtney being the teammate to Sheldon Hoddenchild. I mean, no better person, I guess, to win it than your teammate, right? Both those NOS Energy Drink cars doing work in there. So congrats to them and that team as a whole. Like I said, they dominated the majority of that race. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at for that. Moving on to some news. Quite a busy week for news. I guess, where do we want to start? smallest but good piece of news. IMSA has secured NBC television rights through 2025, so you'll continue to see all your IMSA coverage, sports car series, on NBC, Peacock, USA, all those networks. So if you're an IMSA fan, that's always good to see. I believe that means we should see the 24 Hours of Daytona on there. I know they went USA, well, Le Mans not IMSA, so I guess that doesn't really count. But the IMSA, you should see 24 Hours of Daytona on NBC as well. So good job on them knocking that down and getting secured television rights for next season. We'll just work our way down the chain here. NASCAR news. We'll start with some small congratulations to Daniel Suarez. Trackhouse Racing's Daniel Suarez, number 99, got his U.S. citizenship last week. So congrats to you on that. That's a big step, coming to this country, trying to make something of yourself as a race car driver. Whether you're bumping Kyle or not, either of the Kyles, we'll take it. So congrats on becoming an American citizen. Doing a great job. I'm sure you're working towards contract renewal with Trackhouse. Moving on from there, the Kyle Petty charity ride raised $1.8 million for kids' summertime activity programs there in the North Carolina area, and that's always a great one to see. Anything that gives back to the kids, it's super great that the Pettys are so involved, and they have been for so many years. So congrats on raising nearly $2 million to help out in those communities. Such a good fan base to help out with that too. The NASCAR fan base is crazy. You see an IndyCar trying to compete, just trying to put something together that's close to that is something difficult. But congrats to Kyle Petty and the organization there. So we talked previous about Stewart-Haas separating ties, closing up shop, whatever they were going to do. But it's come out that Gene Haas is going to keep one charter for Cup and run 2 Xfinity cars, and it will be called the Haas Factory Team. Very F1 vibes, but I get it. That's where his focus is. That's where, if anybody's got the money to make this work, it's Gene Haas and the Haas Factory Team. So you have 1 Cup charter, 2 Xfinity cars. Sounds like it'll stay as a Ford-powered program. The way SHR is set up right now in this season, in Xfinity especially, if you're Ford and you're not in a Stewart-Haas car, you're not any good in Xfinity. You can try all you want, but the only top 10 Fords in Xfinity are Stewart-Haas cars. So hopefully he can keep that going with those 2 cars that he's got there. Primarily, it'll be Haas as the sponsor for the Cup car. See a lot of Haas liveries, just like you do now on the 1 charter. And then it's up in the air. I'm sure you'll have rolling sponsors for the Xfinity cars. Haas will be involved in that as well. So kind of cool to see Gene Haas staying. I don't know exactly. They haven't announced who the driver lineup will be, I'm sure, as things come out. But they will keep the shop they've got now. Obviously, it seems like Tony's just selling his portion to Gene, and whatever they can raise off the charters and go from there. Another thing, it looks like 2025 playoffs will be shaken up a little bit. They've confirmed a couple things on tracks for the playoffs. Some tracks will even add in others. So we'll see how that all shakes up. It sounds like we're losing. You're going to gain New Hampshire, lose Homestead. I believe Darlington's going back in. A couple other little things like that. So we'll see. Be nice to change up the season finish. I get the weather and the time frame and everything for it to be in Phoenix, and the Phoenix crowd comes out for the most part. I mean, I think the ticket sales in Phoenix are better than Homestead in November, but I guess we'll see what they come up with that. And then we talked about on a previous episode Martin Truex Jr. putting in his retirement from Joe Gibbs Racing at number 19. Well, earlier in the week they kind of dropped the ball in a press conference and dropped the bomb that one of the Chases might be in that car. Everybody obviously knew in the rumor world that it was going to be Chase Briscoe. That has been officially announced as of a couple hours ago. So that'll be good to see. Congratulations to that team with a plan. I still hope to see Truex jumping in either a one-off Gibbs thing or sounds like he's really taken the 23-11 team to heart on that with Denny Hamlin's offer. So hopefully we see something out of that and get to see more action from Truex when he's not fishing. So moving on to IndyCar news, the biggest story was the addition to McLaren's number 6 car, again with the number 6 car. This time, Nolan Siegel. I guess let's rewind a little bit. Nolan Siegel, we mentioned, got the LMP2 class win at Le Mans. Well, ties to that Le Mans car are Mr. Zach Brown, head of McLaren Racing. So you win a Le Mans for Zach Brown. You come in with your own sponsorships. It doesn't really matter, I think, at that point, what your NXT record is. You've ran a couple races. You tried to do the 500. You had a horrific crash, the 500 qualifying. Come back to try to do it again the next day. A lot of respect for that young man and what he's accomplished. Obviously, he's got ties to McLaren, so it only made sense, right? So Nolan Siegel signs a multi-year deal with McLaren to run that number 6 car, and we'll see how that goes. We had this last weekend at Laguna Seca. Qualifying didn't seem to go his way, feeling things out, but through the race, got it put together. I believe he came up, was it 11, 12 spots? He got the biggest mover award for Laguna Seca, so he got it figured out through the course of the race. So there's something there to be said for McLaren and Nolan's time in the car already. He's got a good team to bounce stuff off of. So we'll see how it all pans out for him. I think he's definitely got the skill to make it happen. I don't think he's going to have an all-star year this year, but I think he's definitely going to be something to watch, especially going into next year and towards the second half of the season. I guess we'll see. He did accomplish 3 wins, 8 podiums, 10 top 5 finishes, and a pole in NXT. So he's no stranger to success in the IndyCar program. I guess the next thing is what's old Theo Pourchaire gonna do? Are we gonna see him in a Dale Coyne car? Are we gonna see him in a one-off here and there? He is still tied to Formula 2, and I believe he's a reserve driver for Formula 1, so it's not like he's gonna be out of work by any means. But it was exciting to see what he was doing in that number 6 car. So hopefully we get to continue to see some stuff out of him in the series, and it's not the last we've seen of Teddy Chairs, as they call him. That HMD Motorsports, who was the team that Nolan was with in NXT, they turned that ride over to Christian Brooks for the rest of the season. So give him a couple of races, get his feet under him, and see. That's a top 5 team all day long. So we'll see what they can do with Brooks in there. Other things to talk about. It sounds like there's a couple teams fighting for Lundgaard for the 2025 season. There's been rumors that McLaren's coming after him. RLL's obviously trying to keep him secure, as he's their top driver of the 3 by a long ways. No offense to the other 2, but he's just been getting it done a lot more. I think he's got a lot more fight in him. He's a little younger, still super hungry. We'll see who ends up making a deal with him, but they're working on it. There's rumors of all kinds of things with him. I don't think he's unhappy at RLL, but it's going to be hard to fight that McLaren money, so I guess we'll see. The other thing with that is, would that be a 4th car for McLaren? Because Award's locked in, Siegel's locked in. Rossi is closing in on a deal. They would be fools to get rid of Rossi now that he's getting this momentum. He's getting the team figured out. They're getting their cars figured out. He's definitely a good driver to have, good experience. There's a reason that he's usually involved in a lot of different testing. He's got a lot of good input. So I guess we'll see if that would be a 4th car for McLaren, if they sign Lundgaard, or how they're going to work all that out. But rumor has it Rossi is working a deal with McLaren right now as well to extend 2025 and beyond. And then news that came out I believe it was late last night, early this morning. Logan Sargent, the American F1 driver that was with Williams, parted ways with Williams, and he's going to take a spot at Prema in their new IndyCar team next year, and they are trying to run 2 cars. So Logan Sargent and somebody else, that'll be pretty awesome. Logan Sargent came up in a lot of the smaller American educational type leagues with some guys. There's some experience there, so it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out for everyone. Hopefully Prema has another good driver lined up. Another American driver would be cool to see, but talent's talent. We'll take it wherever. That should cover about it for the news as of right now. A lot of smaller stories out there we didn't touch on, I'm sure, but those are the bigger ones. We'll wait to see if we see Theo Pourchaire again in IndyCar. If not, it was good seeing you when we had you. Chase Briscoe, welcome to Joe Gibbs Racing. And with that, I guess we'll sign off for the day. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Once again, as always, if you have something you want to discuss, comments, rates, likes, you know the drill, do it all. Hit us up at historichotlapse@gmail.com. We'll talk to you next time for another good race recap weekend. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Don't forget to follow us at Historic Hot Laps on X and all your other social platforms for the latest updates and sneak peeks into upcoming episodes. You can reach out to us directly at historichotlapse@gmail.com. Send us your feedback, questions, comments, opinions, and additional subject matter you'd like us to cover. Thanks for tuning in.